There are letters that are written and never sent. Not because the person who wrote them changed their mind about what they wanted to say, but because the saying of it did not feel like enough. Because the words on paper, however carefully chosen, however honestly meant, existed at a remove from the actual human situation they were trying to address, and the person who wrote them knew this, and kept them, and waited, without quite knowing what they were waiting for. Robin Williams kept a letter for 13 months. He kept it in his study at his home in Tiburon, California, in the specific place where he put things he intended to return to. He returned to it several times across those 13 months, took it out, read it again, held it, put it back. He thought about sending it. He decided, each time, that he was not yet ready to send it, though he could not have said precisely what readiness would look like when it arrived. The letter was addressed to a 16-year-old girl named Sarah Mueller, who lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, and whom Robin Williams had never met. Sarah Mueller had written to him in the autumn of 2003. She had written the way young people sometimes write to the people whose work has held them through the worst periods of their lives, with the specific mixture of formality and exposure that comes from addressing a stranger about something private. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on plain notebook paper, in the careful script of a teenager who had decided the thing she was going to say was worth saying carefully. She wrote about depression, not in clinical terms, not in the managed language of someone who has learned to describe their condition to professionals, but in the specific, unguarded language of a person describing what it is actually like to live inside a particular darkness for an extended period. She wrote about the specific quality of the bad mornings, the ones that began before she had opened her eyes, when the weight of the day was already present before the day had technically started. She wrote about the feeling of being in a room full of people and being simultaneously and completely alone. And then she wrote about the films. She had started watching Robin Williams films during the worst of it, she said. Not as entertainment, not as distraction, as something closer to medicine. There was something in the specific quality of what he did on screen, she wrote, that reached into the darkness and showed her something she could not see from inside it, that there was another way to be in the world, that the world contained more warmth than it was showing her at that moment, that someone somewhere understood the territory between comedy and grief and had found a way to inhabit both simultaneously. She wrote, "Your movies kept me here. I'm still here. I wanted you to know that." She did not ask for anything. She did not request a response, a photograph, an acknowledgement of any kind. She said what she needed to say and signed her name and included her address and sent the letter. It arrived at the Tiburon address on a Tuesday morning in late October 2003. Robin Williams read it that same day. He sat with it for a while after reading it. Then he went to his desk and he wrote a reply. The reply took him most of the afternoon. He did not write to Sarah Mueller as a celebrity writing to a fan. He wrote to her as one person writing to another person about something that both of them had, in different ways, been inside. He wrote about depression, his own experience of it, the specific interior texture of it, the way it had characterized certain years of his life, and the way he had found, not a cure exactly, but a series of practices and relationships and understandings that had allowed him to exist alongside it, rather than being consumed by it. He wrote about the films, about what it had meant to him, over the years, to hear from people who said that something he had done on screen had mattered to them in a real way, not in the abstract, not in the language of entertainment, but in the specific way Sarah had described. It kept me here. He wrote that receiving her letter had given him something, had returned something to him about why the work mattered, that he was grateful she had sent it. He wrote about being 16, about the specific difficulty of being 16 and being inside something dark, about the way the darkness at that age feels permanent in a way it does not feel at later ages, and about the fact that it is not permanent, that the person on the other side of it is the same person who is inside it different, but themselves. He signed it with his name. He folded it. He addressed an envelope to Sarah Mueller in Cincinnati. He held the envelope for a long time. He did not send it. He could not have explained, with precision, why not. He was not dissatisfied with what he had written. He was not uncertain about whether to respond at all. He was uncertain about whether the response was enough. Whether the letter, however honest, however carefully written, was equal to what Sarah's letter had been. Whether words on paper could carry what he wanted to carry to a 16-year-old girl in Ohio who had written that his work had kept her alive. He put the letter in his study and told himself he would figure out the rest. The months passed. He was working the angriest man in Brooklyn. Films, television appearances, the continuous professional momentum of a career at full operation. He thought about Sarah Mueller periodically. He took the letter out sometimes and read it again. He thought about adding to it, about whether there was something more he could say that would make the sending of it feel sufficient. There never seemed to be. 13 months after writing the reply, Robin Williams was in New York for a series of public appearances. Among them was a charity event at a large Midtown hotel, the kind of organized gathering that Robin Williams attended often and that required of him the specific managed performance of being publicly himself for an extended period of time. He was good at this. He had been doing it for 30 years. He knew how to be in a room of several hundred people and make each person in it feel, at some point in the evening, that they had received his full attention, even though the full attention was necessarily distributed and therefore, by definition, not fully given to anyone. This particular evening he was working a large room, moving from table to table, saying the things that the occasion required, when he became aware of a young woman standing at the edge of the room. She was perhaps 17 or 18. She was alone, in the way that people are alone at events they have come to on volunteer or assistant credentials, rather than as principal guests. The specific standing apart quality of someone who is there in a working capacity and who does not quite have the social architecture for joining the room's main conversations. She was watching him from the edge. He noticed her the way he noticed everyone completely, instantaneously. The comprehensive attention that processed a room and identified its specific human details as automatically as other people processed the ambient noise. He saw her face. He saw the expression on it. He crossed the room. He said, "I don't think we've met." She said, "No." She said her name. She said she was there helping with the event logistics, that she had come from Cincinnati. She was at school in New York now, her first year. She had volunteered for the event through a university program. He said Cincinnati. He said it with the specific quality of someone placing a word that means more than the word itself. Cincinnati. The return address on an envelope he had been carrying for 13 months. He said, "What's your name?" She said, "Sarah. Sarah Mueller." The room continued around them. The charity event went on doing what charity events do. Two people stood at the edge of it, and Robin Williams looked at Sarah Mueller, who was now 17, who was in New York for the first year of her education, who was standing in a hotel room in Midtown with the particular quality of someone who is not yet sure they are allowed to take up the space they are in, and he understood what the waiting had been for. He said, "I wrote you a letter." Sarah Mueller looked at him. He said, "You wrote to me last year about the films, about what they meant to you." I wrote back, but I never sent it. I've been carrying it for a year. Sarah Mueller was quiet for a moment. He could see her processing what he had just said. The formality of it and the strangeness of it, and something beneath both of those things, the specific quality of someone receiving information that reconfigures something they had already filed away as completed and gone. She had written the letter and sent it and not heard back, and had understood, as you understand these things, that a response was unlikely, and that the value of the writing had been in the writing itself, and not in any reply. She had moved from Cincinnati to New York. She had made her life here, tentatively, the first year's tentativeness of a new city and a new school. She had continued. She had not forgotten writing the letter. She had simply placed it in the category of things that were true and private and concluded. Robin Williams said, "I have it with me." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He had put the letter there that morning not specifically for this. He had not known this was coming. He had simply gotten into the habit. over the 13 months of carrying it with him when he traveled. The way people carry things they haven't resolved. He held it out to her. She took it. She stood there, at the edge of a charity event in a Midtown Manhattan hotel, and she read a letter that Robin Williams had written to her 14 months earlier and never sent. The room continued around her. He stood beside her while she read. She did not cry. She was the kind of person who did not cry in public if she could help it, but her expression held everything that crying would have held, contained in the specific stillness of someone receiving something they did not expect and do not yet know how to receive. When she looked up, he said, "I'm sorry it took so long." She said, "You kept it." He said, "Yes." She said, "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Because your letter deserved more than I knew how to give it. I kept thinking I'd figure out what the more was, and then I thought, maybe the more was just this, finding you and giving it to you in person." Sarah Mueller has not spoken publicly about this evening. She has spoken about it privately, to 3 people she trusts, her closest friend from Cincinnati, her therapist, and, years later, her younger sister. The accounts of all 3 are consistent. She describes the evening as something that reconfigured her understanding of cause and effect, of the long loops through which things that are sent out into the world sometimes return. She had written a letter to a stranger about the darkest period of her life. The stranger had written back, had held on to the reply for over a year, had found her by the specific accident of a volunteer program and a charity event and a city they were both in on the same night, had given her, in person, the letter that had been written for her and held in an inside pocket for months. In the years that followed, Sarah Mueller studied psychology. She became, eventually, a therapist who works specifically with adolescents experiencing depression. She has said, in the careful way that therapists speak about things that are both personal and professional, that her work is informed by an understanding of what it means to be in the darkness at 16 and to have something reach in. She has the letter. She keeps it in a specific place, not on display, not archived, but accessible, a place she can go to when she needs it. She has read it many times in the years since the night in Manhattan. Robin Williams died in August 2014. Sarah Mueller was 27 years old. She heard the news at her desk in the office where she was completing her clinical hours. She sat for a long time without moving. She thought about the letter, about the 13 months it spent in a study in Tiburon, about the inside pocket of a jacket at a charity event, about what it meant that the letter had not been sent, that it had been held, instead, for the specific occasion of being given in person. She thought, he waited until he could give it to me himself. She did not know if this was what he had intended. She did not know if the finding of her had been accidental or the result of something more deliberate, if he had kept the letter specifically hoping for such a meeting, or if the meeting was simply what happened when you carried a thing long enough and the world arranged itself around the carrying. She decided it did not matter. What mattered was the letter. What mattered was the reading of it at the edge of a hotel room in Midtown Manhattan, while the person who had written it stood beside her. What mattered was that someone had thought her letter deserved more than could be given by paper and envelope and post, had held on to that belief for 13 months, had found her, and had said, "Here, this was always for you." She still has it. She sleeps with it nearby. Not every night, but on the nights when the darkness comes back, the darkness she knows well, the one she writes about in the clinical notes and speaks about in the therapy room, and carries in the professional knowledge of someone who has been inside the thing they are trained to treat on those nights. She reaches for the letter, and it is there, the way it was always going to be there, eventually, the way some things travel through time by being held rather than sent, by being carried by the right person until the right moment arrives. There is something particular about a letter that has been written and not sent. It occupies a different category from the letters that go out it has been written, which means it has been committed to, the words chosen and arranged, and the thoughts made as precise as they are going to be made. But it has not been delivered, which means it still belongs entirely to the person who wrote it. exists still in the space between the private intention and the public act. For 13 months, Robin Williams carried a letter in that in-between space. He carried it, in the most literal sense, in the inside pocket of whatever jacket he was traveling in. Not always. Sometimes it stayed in the study in Tiburon, on the desk in the specific place he had put it. But often, when he was traveling, he would take it with him. He could not have said exactly why. He was not consciously looking for Sarah Mueller. He did not know she had come to New York. He did not know they would be in the same hotel on the same November night in 2004. He simply carried the letter because putting it away entirely felt like a form of abandonment he was not prepared to commit to. Sarah Mueller, in the years she has spoken about this to the 3 people she has told, has returned repeatedly to the specific quality of the moment when Robin Williams said, "I have it with me." She has said that this sentence, 4 words, the most ordinary construction, "I have it with me," produced in her the specific feeling of something she had thought closed, being opened again. Not reopened the way a wound is reopened, opened the way a window is opened, suddenly, with light coming through. She had sent the letter to someone famous and expected nothing. She had received nothing for over a year and understood this to be the normal outcome and had incorporated it into her understanding of how the world works, the ratio of what you send out to what comes back. She had filed it and moved on, the way she had moved on from Cincinnati and the worst years of her adolescence and the darkness that the films had helped her through. And then, "I have it with me." 4 words. The letter in his inside pocket, the room around them continuing to be a room. She has said, "I remember thinking, he kept it. For over a year he kept it, and I had assumed that it went into a pile, and then into an archive, and then into nothing. That's how I thought those things worked. I had no framework for someone keeping it. What the keeping meant, whether it meant intention, whether it meant he had kept it specifically with the hope of finding her, whether it was simply the accumulation of months of not being able to put it down, she has never known, and Robin Williams is no longer here to be asked. She has decided it doesn't matter. The meaning is in the fact, not in the intention behind the fact. He kept it. He was there. She was there. He recognized her name. He had the letter in his jacket. He gave it to her in person. That is the story. That is the whole of it. She became a therapist who works with adolescents in depression. She has said that she tells none of her clients about the letter. It is not her practice to import her own experience into the therapy room. But she says that what she carries from that November evening in Manhattan into every session, with every 16-year-old who sits across from her and describes a darkness that feels permanent, is the knowledge of the long loops, the knowledge that things sent out into the world travel in ways you cannot track or predict, and that they sometimes come back, and that the coming back happens on a timeline that does not consult you and does not conform to what feels reasonable. She tells them, "You don't know yet what the next chapter is. You don't know yet what is being held for you in the inside pocket of something you haven't encountered yet." She doesn't explain where this comes from. She doesn't need to. The letter is in its specific place at home. She knows where it is. She can reach it without looking, the way you can reach the things you've placed with care. On the nights when the darkness comes back, she reaches for it, and it is there, and that is enough. That is everything. Robin Williams wrote many letters in his life. He was a person who responded to people, to their work, to their difficulty, to the specific things they sent him that arrived in the mail or through intermediaries or across the distance between a stage and an audience. He wrote quickly, in the margins of schedules, in the brief windows between productions and appearances, and the sustained public output of a career at full operation. Most of those letters went out. Most of them traveled the ordinary path from desk to envelope to post to the hands of the person they were intended for, and became the thing they were intended to be: a reply, a response, a gift of attention from a person who could have given nothing and chose to give something. Sarah Mueller's letter sat in a study for 13 months. Then it sat in an inside pocket for the months of travel between the writing and the night in Manhattan. Then it was taken out and given to the person it had always been for, in the specific form that the situation had waited for, face to face, in person, in the midst of a crowded room that neither of them would have predicted finding the other in. She was there because of a university volunteer program that connected first-year students to charity events in the city. He was there because it was on his calendar, one of many events in a city he visited often. Neither had any reason to expect the other. The world, which does not arrange itself for the convenience of narrative, arranged itself that night, and he had the letter. That is the fact that Sarah Mueller returns to across the 20 years since that November. Not the coincidence coincidences happen. The world is large and produces them regularly. The fact that he had the letter, that it was in his pocket, that he had been carrying it, she has said, the coincidence is the shape the story took. The carrying is the story itself. She is right. The carrying is the story. 13 months of not being able to put it down, 13 months of returning to it and deciding, each time, that the sending of it was not yet right. 13 months of holding the belief, without being able to articulate it, that what Sarah Mueller's letter had said to him, your movies, kept me here. I'm still here. I wanted you to know that deserved something that words on paper traveling through the postal system could not fully carry. He was right. The letter deserved to be given in person. The world agreed. And on a November evening in Manhattan, in the middle of a charity event that neither of them planned to be significant, it was.